Good day. No sooner had President Paul Biya returned from what turned out to be a triumphant diplomatic sojourn in Switzerland than he immediately swung into action by chairing via video conference an extraordinary summit of heads of state of the CEMAC sub-region. We shall get into the details of this very important meeting in Yaoundé with our guest. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Inside the Presidency, and I am your humble servant, Ashu Nyenti in Yaoundé. Let's have the news. With what had happened in the past couple of weeks in Geneva, this kind of mobilization is no surprise. It is in this festive mood that the airbird transporting Paul and Chantal Biya touches down on the tarmac of the Nsimalen International Airport at exactly 4:45 p.m. 1 month and 1 week after they left for a private stay in Switzerland. After a brief taxi of the plane, the President of the Republic in full mask meets at the foot of the ramp, a welcome party at the head of which are the Senate President and the Prime Minister. One was not said since the head of state traveled to Geneva, but today he returns full of energy, looking refreshed, relaxed with determination and assurance, confounding skeptics and reassuring his supporters before meeting another team of his close administrative and political collaborators, including CPDM Chief Scribe, the Minister's Deputy Secretary General of the Presidency, Elon Paul, and Muhammad Mustafa. President Paul Biya and his wife will show gratitude by first waving at these crowds that have waited for them for hours, cheering and waving in approval. The President then goes on to receive in quick succession Senate President Marcel Njifendi, Prime Minister Head of Government Joseph Jangute, Minister of State Secretary General of the Presidency Ferdinand Ngongo, and the Secretary General of the CPDM Central Committee Jean Kwete. Concomitantly, in a nearby room, Madame Chantal Biya rounds off sharing stories of her trip with the spouses of her husband's close collaborators, just in time for the couple to cruise into town. Throughout the itinerary, it is come and say, even the early afternoon downpour in Yaoundé has not deterred the population in ecstasy on seeing their president return, not only hale and hearty, but also full of vigor. Just before nightfall, the presidential motorcade penetrates through the giant gates of the Unity Palace to a popular and sustained clamor. The skies of Yaoundé have suddenly changed. Paul Biya is back. The Ministers of External Relations, the Economy and Regional Development, as well as the Minister of Finance and the Budget, who do the backstage work on the Cameroonian side, arrive at the Unity Palace just before President Paul Biya, sitting chairman of the Conference of Heads of State of CEMAC, makes his entry into the conference hall and ensures that every detail has been sorted out. 5 doctors to examine 1 patient, the CEMAC economy. Indeed, all the heads of state are present by video link except for Congo, whose president, Denis Sassou Nguesso, is here represented by the country's prime minister, as well as representatives of the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and France. The Chief of State Protocol, Simon Pierre Bikele, introduces the first phase of the program.
The speech of the President of the Republic of Cameroon, His Excellency Paul Biya, current President of the Conference of Heads of States.
In his opening address, President Paul Biya salutes the memory of late Chadian President Idriss Déby Itno, a very much appreciated proponent of sub-regional integration. Paul Biya then reviews the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic to the economies of the sub-region, but he takes pride in that the sub-region has, despite most difficulties, slowed down the progress of the disease towards the extreme poverty and vulnerabilities that have resurfaced because of COVID-19. President Paul Biya has made two major proposals. One, that vaccination remains the most appropriate answer to COVID-19. And secondly, that countries with bigger financial resources should show more solidarity by surrendering part of their special drain rights to African countries. But even when this will happen, he says CEMAC countries must swallow the bitter pill, that is, reform their economies, put good governance at the center of their policies. The critical examination of what reforms to undertake is the major stake in this meeting. The clock is ticking. There is no time, he concludes. This preliminary statement is followed by a group photograph, still by video conference. It is at this point that the summit breaks up for a closed-door session. When the summit reconvenes about 2.5 hours later, Cameroon's Minister of the Economy, Alamin Ousmane May, presents a 24-paragraph final communique that adopts all the measures earlier proposed by President Paul Biya and a global framework on how CEMAC countries will come out of the economic quagmire and resolve their security and political challenges. It is on this note of satisfaction that the chairperson of CEMAC, President Paul Biya, urged his peers to implement the resolutions they have all adopted while re-emphasizing the need for peace, security and stability within the CEMAC sub-region. The satisfaction on Cameroon's technical prowess of organizing a video conference was visible on every face. To enable us get into greater detail on the issues just raised, I'm receiving Cameroon's Minister of the Economy, Planning and Regional Development, Mr. Alamin Ousmane May. Mr. Minister, it's my pleasure to receive you on this program today.
It's my pleasure too, Ashininti.
We are talking about the extraordinary summit of CEMAC Heads of State that took place on the 18th of August this year, a couple of days ago. Mr. Minister, what was the major stake of this summit?
I should, to have a sound understanding and accurate understanding of the issues at stake, I suggest we go back to 2016. 2016 was a year when our economies experienced a sharp decline of commodity prices. This had an impact on our macroeconomic stability. Deficit was widening, which leads to soaring of our public debt, sometimes with high distress risk. On the monetary side, we were seeing a depletion of our exchange reserves, putting at risk our monetary stability, and this could have led to an adjustment of our common currency. These two major aspects of our performance that time led our head of states to come together under the initiative of the President of the Republic, His Excellency Paul Biya, to strategize around the solutions to be implemented facing this economic challenge at that time. The framework was very clear with 5 pillars. The first one was about fiscal consolidation. The second was about stability on the monetary and financial system. The third was about cooperation, international cooperation and reform with our international partners. The fourth was about diversification, and the last one was about integration. In 2019, during a summit which was probably an assessment
November 2019.
November 2019, exactly. This summit has shown that the strategy of our head of state has yielded very strong and satisfactory results. Growth has become positive. Fiscal deficit was reduced, and most importantly, our position in terms of reserve has been strengthened. This was a very strong result of this important strategy, and we were very pleased at that time to see that CEMAC has come back on the right track for its emergence. 2019, sadly, experienced also COVID-19. 2019, first of all, because the issue around COVID-19 started late
December 2019.
But we were probably exposed to that beginning of 2020. And the consequences of this health crisis, combined with two other challenges, social security crisis as well as climate change challenges, have increased the pressure on our economies in terms of stress and in terms of progress. One thing we should say, world economy has experienced 2020 the first ever recession up to 3.3%. Africa, after 25 years of positive growth, has experienced also a recession. The CEMAC area has also, in this line, seen a recession of 1.7%. You can easily understand that this health crisis, with its economic, financial, and social consequences, requires our head of state to come together to examine the situation and to even see what measures can be implemented in addition to those measures taken in 2016 with the satisfactory results we had in 2019. I just want to say that, as usual, under the leadership of our head of state, this time around, our head of state came together to evaluate the macroeconomic situation in the CEMAC area in the context of COVID-19 and surely come up with the right solutions to be implemented in terms of response to the health crisis, to the economic crisis, to the financial crisis, and the social crisis, to be able to get back to strong growth and development of our economies.
With this analysis you have made, Mr. Minister, would you say that the outcome met the expectations?
I want definitely to say yes. The first thing we should recognize is this summit has demonstrated a strong will, political will, and determination of action from our head of state in this sub-region. This is one aspect, but to go into the details, one can see that our economies have been able to preserve the consequences of this health crisis through measures implemented by our authorities under the leadership of our head of states. We benefited certainly from emergency financing from our international partners. We also got the support in terms of debt service suspension initiative. But one thing I would like to add, and it is going to happen today, is the allocation, the general allocation of $750 billion from the IMF. Our sub-region will receive roughly 832 billion CFA. Two things we can learn from that. The first one is we'll have more fiscal space to continue to support our response against the health crisis. Secondly, we will also have our reserve go up to 832 billion CFA. So, which means that our economies will have a very strong impetus to continue to fight against COVID-19 and also use the resources to face other challenges which are of great importance for our economy while stabilizing our external position through stepping up our reserve up to 832 billion CFA. Cameroon, in this situation, will receive around 216 billion CFA. Just to say that liquidity will be injected in our economies, reserve will go up, and we'll have more fiscal space to continue our development process. I want to believe also that this situation has laid bare some of our structural weaknesses, and we need to address them properly. Diversification, one. If we are facing difficulties right now, it's because so far, based on oil, we have been able to collect enough resources through selling of oil, but if we have economies which are heavily dependent on oil, we are at risk. So diversification should be very, very high on the agenda. Second, structural reforms. We have implemented many of them, but we need to continue, because with structural reform, we will be able to transform our economy, move towards industrialization, promote greater private sector initiative, attract more foreign direct investment, and bring our economies to an industrial level. This will create more and greater resilience for our economy. The third is integration. We have been able to progress on that side, but we have to continue, because inter-regional trade is not sufficient to help us be more resilient if there is a shock, exogenous shock from elsewhere. These 3 points are important, and one of them should catch our attention for the long time to go. Why? Because human capital, we have seen during this crisis, should remain at the center of public policies. This is true. Greater health, better education, and certainly more and greater inclusion into the economy. And this is where we believe that despite the satisfactory outcome we have seen, we will continue to work in making these areas also very satisfactory for the betterment of our development.
While waiting for the sub-region to work in this regard, that summit was sanctioned by a 24-point resolution or final communication where you had the honor of presenting it. It is true that you have begun to discuss some of them already, and all of them are important. But let me ask you, which of these resolutions do you think are decisive for the sub-region?
Actually, you said it. I was privileged to read the final communique, and you are also right in saying that all of the 24 resolutions, recommendations are of great importance. I want to just emphasize on those resolutions that will help us accelerate our development process and help us become economies with a greater resilience. I mentioned it before, and it is clear that without a stronger diversification of our economy, we will have to recall the saying that goes like this: if you put all your eggs
in one basket,
you are at high risk. So economically, we also have to diversify. Diversifying, which means going beyond oil, going beyond commodity, making sure we integrate value chain, making sure we go beyond industrialization. This will help us diversify our export products. This will help us create more jobs in our economies, and this will certainly guarantee a greater stability in case of a crisis. The second one is integration. We want to think that those communities that have displayed stronger resilience were able to interact, trade amongst themselves. COVID-19 has been a shock both on demand and supply, which is to say, demand has gone sharply down. We were not able to export our products, and production also went down because of measures to protect not only lives but livelihoods. So production went down, demand went down, has led to very difficult situation for our economies. So diversification and integration should be linked. And the head of state have mentioned it. 11 of our integration projects received financing from the international community. We have to continue and speed up their implementation such that we trade much among ourselves. Third, several of the recommendations were around structural reforms. We are doing a lot in terms of public finance management, good governance, but we have to improve on revenue mobilization using new technologies, using digital, and making sure that we have a broader base of revenue collection. At the same time, we should make our expenditure more efficient, more effective. This will reduce, at the end of the day, the deficit, and it will also reduce the debt that is incurred due to deficit. The third, which is structural reform, should be completed with certainly what we want to see become a critical consideration. We have challenges. Climate change. We have security challenges. These challenges, we have to deal with them. The world is changing very fast. The world is globalized. And if we don't address in combination these two challenges with those which were probably set in terms of solutions since 2016, it will be very difficult for us to achieve the development stage we are looking for, which is becoming an emerging country by 2035. Certainly, with the support of our partners. With the support of our partners, because we have to mobilize more resources. With the contribution of the IMF, and this is where our countries should make the effort to finalize as quick as possible their programs with the IMF. Why is it important? We receive directly from IMF financial resources, but programs are also catalysts for development policy operations, which is to say World Bank, African Development Bank, and other financial partners come in when we have programs with the IMF, and they will bring in more resources to help us accelerate our development process, to help us cover all these priority expenses, which are certainly in this current situation difficult to cover, but in combination, in solidarity, in a concerted approach, our head of state has shown that it's possible to overcome these challenges and get to a better situation.
Now, President Paul Biya, who is the sitting chairman of the Conference of Heads of State, in his address is a tool on that day, emphasized on the theme of solidarity. But I'm much more interested in how this aspect of solidarity relates to the ordinary Cameroonian.
I think solidarity is probably something which is very dear to our head of state, not only at the sub-regional level, but also at the national level. Solidarity, because I think it's hard to achieve great things if you are alone. It is very impossible to realize great things if you are not in a team, in a group, using this solidarity value. But I want to also echo solidarity in our context right now. We have challenges within our countries. Yes, it may happen But challenges, we can address them if we are strongly, boldly using solidarity to face all these crises and challenges. This is, to me, something the head of state has always been constant in mentioning, and he is just extending it to the sub-region because he believes deeply in solidarity, and he demonstrates, believe me, in 2016, I think that it is solidarity that has led the head of state to convene a summit, an extraordinary summit here in Yaoundé. In 2019, it was again an extraordinary summit of head of state, just to show that solidarity will help us not only design our strategy, evaluate, but this time around, even if it is in a video conference format, it's always strong and good to be in a solidarity approach to assess the situation and come up with solutions that will help us overcome these difficulties we are facing right now at the national, at the sub-regional, as well as at the international level.
As we go towards the end of this, I will say, very enriching conversation, Mr. Minister. It's a pleasure. But since March 2019, President Paul Biya has been the chairperson of the Conference of Head of State of the CEMAG. What would you say have been the major hallmarks of his leadership at the level of the CEMAG?
Actually, I think your program alone will not be sufficient to talk about all these hallmarks. But let me, to say the least,
some important ones.
Let me, to say the least, talk about three things. The first one, leadership in itself. I mentioned it before. Our head of state was at the steer of these three extraordinary summits. He is the one who convened his fellow head of states. More importantly, he has been capable to make international high-ranking personality join, to share their knowledge, to help address the issues, and to come up with a very strong concerted solution. So leadership, wise leadership of our head of state has always been at the center of his actions. But we talked about solidarity. It's also at the heart of his approach. Third one is determination in action. Despite the difficulties, despite the challenges of recent, the crisis, security, as well as the climate change, on the top of the economic crisis before, our head of state has remained steady, focused, to be able to get to the destination we are all wishing to attain. On the road, I want to think that through his leadership, we were able to demonstrate how strong we want to live together at the sub-region level, at the national level. Second, we have been able to unify our stock exchange markets. Today, we have only one stock exchange market in the sub-region in Douala. Third, we have been able to preserve our economies from a monetary adjustment. This is thanks to the head of state since 2016 and in continuation since 2019, as I mentioned, during the evaluation summit. And during this summit, we were instructed to consolidate all the measures towards stabilizing our macroeconomic performances, our stability externally as well as internally, and to make sure that our policies, fiscal policies, economic policies, monetary policies, social policies, and lately, health policies are geared towards bringing our economies to the place where our populations are really looking for to be. Prosperity, shared prosperity, good living conditions, better inclusion in terms of work, but an environment where development should be faster, better, greener, inclusive, and where Cameroonians, besides all the other people from the CIMEC, will be proud to see that this is what we are doing together, and these are the satisfactory results we have been able to achieve.
That's a good landing. Minister Alamin Usman May, thank you very much for your insight.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashinyenchi, for giving me this opportunity to share with you some of this information around this great event, the extraordinary summit that took place last week under the leadership of our head of state, His Excellency President Paul Biya. We continue in that same line, ladies and gentlemen. I invite you to watch how President Paul Biya has been managing the various crises that he has faced since he took office on 6th of November 1982 to our present day. Just watch. The peculiar circumstances of Paul Biya's accession to power on Saturday 6th November 1982 triggered a recipe for a Molotov cocktail of adversity.
The former president handed over in bad faith. That I can tell you. He handed over in bad faith. If anybody, anybody that goes who thinks otherwise, it will not be honest. It will not be honest. So he handed over in bad faith, and frankly speaking, indirectly or directly, he wanted our current president to fail. So we saw the events that took place afterwards, and it was unfortunate.
In 1984, when there was the attempted coup, that period too was very, very traumatic. It created so much uncertainty. People did not know what was going to be next. You see, you have a fund, and it doesn't matter as long as everything is going along well in your village. You don't care what the fund is doing, but the moment you realize that the fund is not there, it becomes a different ball game. And that situation in '84 caused a lot of panic. People panicked. I saw people running to their villages because nobody knew what was going to be the outcome.
But the resilience and people's power were Paul Biya's forte in these difficult moments.
Cameroonian would decide to protect his new president. That is for me, the most important thing, because he has spent at least 2 years on power, and some soldier coming from Garde Republicaine, it was his name at that time, begin to shoot in Yaoundé. And I think that all the population was behind the president. And after we have all what we have, the president decided to sanction some people, military, other were shoot, they organized a trial and so on. But the most important for me was the attitude of the whole Cameroonian who wanted to support the new president.
Yet, that was just the beginning. The path of his presidency was going to be strewed with more and more obstacles. In each of the misfortunes, he, like the Lion King, moved from conquest to conquest, helped by a rare combination of sang-froid, skill in political timing, a perfect understanding of man as a political animal, and an irresistible power of persuasion. We are in the early 1990s. The Berlin Wall has just been pulled down. The east wind of change seemed to have settled and was blowing violently across the continent. Everywhere in Africa, there were more and more deafening calls from citizens seeking greater freedoms and power alternation. Cameroon was no exception. Paul Biya was just 8 years in office.
We got independence after some friction and some rebellion against the French people. And once independent, the government has to just keep the people and the population in peace. But blood has been poured out. People died during these years of 1950, 55, 58, 50. People like Rudani Nyobe and many others died. And when you have a conflict, when you have seen the blood of somebody, you must be very careful to keep people in peace. This brought President Aijo to have a very strong security system. It means that people didn't have the liberty to express themselves or to say what they think and everything. This was the legacy of Cameroonian people. So when what we call Anambra ghost town came, it was like you have to open a closed bottle with gas inside. People found themselves completely free to declare what they want to declare and to contest what they want to contest. And this was all of a sudden completely strange for the people. And when you are in such a situation, you don't have the measure. You don't know how far you can go and how far you cannot go.
The people were angry. It's normal. But we have to know that we have a country which you have to build. And I can only say it was a very, very bad period for our history.
It was Bomasok who began to send what we call in French tract, some of papers who call people to stay at home, to disobey to the government and so on. And in April, I think, April or beginning of May, we start the ghost town. Ghost town in Douala, ghost town in Bafoussam, ghost town in Bamenda. All the west part of Cameroon was blocked. And the aim of those who launched this movement was to push the government to open the social life and the political life.
While elsewhere on the continent others hesitated, President Paul Biya took an avant-gardist role to introduce party pluralism that was not to the taste of many, especially within his own political family.
When the president himself, President Paul Biya, announced that there was going to be a multi-party system, the first people who protested, of course, were also CPDM people. Incidentally, they said, no, we don't want multi-party, but Paul Biya said, no, there has to be multi-party. As head of the party, we must move on.
But he would be pedagogic, taking time to bring all on board. But it was clear at this juncture that the political opposition, with its newfound freedoms, wanted something more.
We made a great confusion between freedom and in French we say libertinage. It was a bad use of what we call freedom. And everybody begin to think that I can insult you. We have the rise up of newspaper, private newspaper, until the morning to evening. The motto was to insult everybody who have power and so on, treat them like they are not competent and so on. So we didn't take the time to analyze the situation very calmly.
A proverb of our country says that when you fall, try to know where you hit your foot. I think at that period, Cameroonians themselves start to destroy their living together. Yeah. Cameroonians became tribalistic. That is the way where the social problem we have today start. Violent speech. It seems to me that at that period, Cameroonians break all the roads of their country. A country which don't have money. A country who try to be built. Cameroonians put fire on the road. Cameroonians broke and burned houses, British houses, something like that. Cameroonians themselves. So it's a very bad time, but a very sad time.
Calls for civil disobedience, ghost towns and urban guerrilla mired the country into an ungovernable quagmire.
Prices for goods went up. It was difficult to travel around. And then you had a lot of people who wondered whether the country would ever get back to what is normal. When once you have that, there is fear. Fear isn't good for business. Fear isn't good for the government. Fear isn't good for the population. So those were numerous consequences which were not in the interest of this nation.
The ghost towns created a lot of financial stress to families. People could not go to their farms as they would. They couldn't go to the markets the days that they were locked up. But then there was such disorder. I would say the ghost towns brings along a lot of disorder, and many things arise as a result of that. Look, we never had bikes in town here before, but then because of ghost towns, bikes came into use, and of course bikes have grown now. We have thousands of bikes all over the country.
People declared ghost towns. They asked people not to pay taxes. They asked people not to obey the administration. It was just an uncontrolled freedom.
Even though I was in Canada, I came home in June 1991, went to my village. On returning from Oko, I got to Bamenda, but it took me almost 10 days to find a vehicle to travel from Bamenda to Douala. And during that time, I missed my flight and had to get another flight in order to leave Cameroon for Canada. So that was a difficult time for this country.
Like a gladiator in the arena, the president who has mastered the virtue of silence as an art in governance said nothing. He took his time and weighed his options.
We thought that the president will be afraid to come to the heart of this way of contestation, which is based, the hard core of it was in Douala. And we believe that the country was no more governed, was no more ruled. Since we declared so many things, don't pay taxes, don't pay your electricity fees, don't obey to these people and that, don't obey to how people used to call to police. So when you are able to say that, it means that you are no more ruled by a regular government. And who is in the top of this regular government is President Biya. So we believe that in this freedom we have conquered, the president wouldn't dare to come to Douala. But he dared, and he came. This was to confirm that maybe we were dreaming that the Cameroon is no more governed, but the Cameroon is governed. And governed by President Biya. And he comes to Douala because Douala is in Cameroon. Part of the country is ruling. And nothing can prevent him from coming to Douala in order to assess that the country is governed.
He decided to go himself in Douala because certain persons have said that the president will not have the possibility to come to Douala. If he comes to Douala, they will kill him. And he said, "No voici à Douala. No voici donc à Douala." And people discover a new man. It is a calm man, and it's a man who can have also the capability to respond if you want to respond.
Ne pas parler fort ne signifie pas pour autant que l'on n'a rien à dire. Le silence et la modération ne sont pas des signes de faiblesse. Oui à la liberté, non à l'anarchie.
Douala, the economic capital of Cameroon, was the very heart, the epicenter of the socio-political contestations. The intention of the opponents of the regime was to cripple the economy and force the hand of the president. With their newfound freedoms, the man who gave the dog teeth became the first victim of his bites. Chants of Biya must go became more and more audible.
These people were just demonstrating. Asked for was a national conference, National Sovereign Conference, in order to bring all the Cameroonians together and to find solution for what we disagree with.
But Paul Biya remained stoic as ever. He had taken time to analyze the situation and had come to the conclusion that he was on the right track. On June 27, 1991, on the floor of the National Assembly, he shared with the Cameroonian people the fruits of his prolonged reflection.
Je l'ai dit et je le maintiens, la conférence nationale est sans objet pour le Cameroun.
I believe that it was the President Biya's strategy. The government first stood quiet. People were pouring in the streets, goes down, people must say, they just even insulted Paul Biya, and so on. But he stood quiet. I think that he stood quiet because at that time, he didn't have any clear solution. I believe that at the beginning, he even analyzed the National Sovereign Conference to see if it can really bring a solution to Cameroon or not. Then he came to a conclusion that it's not the right way to solve this solution.
Positions became radicalized. Intransigence best describes this epoch. New actors had emerged, with the most emblematic being the Union for Change, with Nigel Fundi's SDF in his heyday on the driver's seat.
The Union of Change had parties of UPC under Dikakwa, Hamani Biale, etc. NDP was not part of the Union of Change. And they were marching. And civil disobedience, burning of houses, council buildings, and so on. So that one was a serious problem, very serious to the state. Came out with the idea of boycotting French goods, marching to Yaoundé, reach Sananga River where they were chased back and so on.
But with method, timing and staying power, the Biya regime began to loosen the noose.
We need opposition in the country, but we need a constructive opposition. The opposition have to understand we cannot change things like, when the people who are in the opposition only think that to make things moving is to change things. But I think we can improve things. We have to improve. We can only improve when we are in dialogue, and to accept that, it is a process.
It is all about leadership, giving responsibilities to collaborators and people, and ensuring that there is a follow-up. Because if you give responsibilities and you don't follow them up, there come a time when people will say, okay, they can be laxed. But the president has been consistently doing a follow-up to the different directives that he has been able to give. So it's all about leadership. And we must applaud him for that.
Little by little, and especially after his bold visit to Douala, the president began to cut into whatever psychological advantage the opposition enjoyed. But in a political battle, you count more on your strengths than on the weaknesses of the opponents.
He was a very calm president. He didn't speak a lot, and we didn't know if the situation enjoyed him or not. That is for me a very good attitude, because I think that if he decided to go directly to the front, I think that this Cameroon will be clash at that time. But I want to say the stability of the institution was guaranteed, because the army continued to work, the judiciary, and all the government.
In terms of the national cake, everybody has had their own fair share. From the different regions to the different divisions to the different villages, there is nowhere you will go that you don't have somebody, even if it's a minority, that has a say in the government that the president is actually the head of. This tells you that he takes into consideration every bit and ambit of this nation and tell him that this is your nation and you're supposed to be part of this nation. And they are part of the development and the ideas in the contribution of this. Not everybody who is in a position of leadership will touch the different ambits of this nation. But today, if you go to Nkolobong, you go to Akwaya, you go to Medzo, you go to Njikwa, you go to wherever, you will see fully well that there is somebody who sits up to look after their people that has a position to talk within the confines of the government.
He looks at the weaker people, the weaker side of the economy, and very often he takes sides with the weaker population, the disadvantaged population. I'm not talking about disabled, I'm talking about people who are at a disadvantage, the weaker side. He wants to see how this problem is affecting them, and he looks at the solution, first of all, from that point of view, to see how is this affecting women, how is it affecting children, how is this affecting young people, If we take this solution, if we take this method, how will it affect the woman who sells granules on the road? If ghost towns were to continue, how does it affect the woman who is growing her vegetables in Sabga and cannot get it down to Yaoundé? He looks into all those things.
In all of this, Paul Biya demonstrated that he is a visionary. He was courageous from the very beginning to make it known that state authority and the respect of Republican institutions are sacrosanct values that are non-negotiable. Yet, he was determined to govern his people, not necessarily with an iron fist, but with a dose of magnanimity and humanism.
Paul Biya is a tolerance man, he is a passion man, and all events have been managed with that two things, tolerance and patience. For me, what I can, and it's important for Cameroonians to know that the president attitude saves us of many problems, many struggles.
The President of the Republic is one of the most democratic images or figures in the world, and I'll first of all tell you why. Cameroon is the only country in the world, or amongst the few, that anybody can go to the media and even insult the president, and they'll still consider it as free speech. You can quote me anywhere, anytime. Cameroon is the only country in Africa with more than 300 radio stations, community radio stations, and more than 50 TV stations. If you have doubt, you can ask me, where else does it exist? Lots of people always like to put Cameroon in the balance with countries like Cote d'Ivoire. It is just yesterday that the president of Cote d'Ivoire liberalized the media sector. But in Cameroon, you have it everywhere. And because of this, it puts the people in a position where people can express themselves and do their businesses well.
Around this same period, the phlegmatic Paul Biya also handled a crisis of another dimension that was volatile and combustible enough to blow up part of the West and Central African regions.
The head of state showed that he is really a man of peace. Because talking about peace when you don't have any critical situation is easy. But when you are in the heat of public opinions, asking very fiercely, war is not easy. But he did it. Nigerians invaded one part of Cameroon in Bakassi. And they claimed that it is their country. And they put up a flag, a Nigerian flag. This is a declaration of war. You cannot go to somebody else's country and you take a flag, you put it there, and you have to say, okay, this is our flag, this is our country. We want it back to Nigeria. But the president took the time. Once it came that people started fighting somehow and dying here and there, he took the time. And he came out with a wonderful strategy, unexpected, because I don't remember any conflict in Africa resolved that way. Most of the time, people start fighting, and then a ceasefire is demanded, and then negotiators and so on. But by acting like that, the president just neutralized any war.
That was a typical example of a gentleman's way of handling a situation. He opted for a peaceful resolution rather than go to war with our neighboring country. And we all saw that it went very, very well without the firing of one shot. And that's a typical way that I personally knew of our current president.
Today, in the entire Bakassi Peninsula, the sounds of guns have gone dead and the sea has recovered its quietude, with the riverine populations concentrating on finding their daily bread. But who could have imagined this denouement in December 1993, when the army of the Federal Republic of Nigeria decided to attack and occupy this Cameroonian territory? The Cameroonian public was as shocked as its leaders. With consternation, they had only one cry: war on Nigeria. But the head of state, Paul Biya, took the opposite direction. He was aware that international law was on his side. More importantly, he had other no less formidable weapons: faith, the spirit of dialogue, and the power of negotiation.
When I read some people who were close with the president at that time, they say we have two camps. One camp who wanted to push president to declare war to Nigeria, against Nigeria, and a few who tell no, we have to go to negotiation.
That is how, under his watch, the diplomatic machinery was set on motion. In a period spanning about 2 decades, he enjoyed the empathetic good offices of then UN Secretary General, the late Kofi Atta Annan, and the political will of Nigeria's former military and civilian head of state, Matthew Aremu Olusegun Obasanjo.
The president showed his talent as a big statesman, worked very well with our Nigerian neighbors, the Nigerian leaders, and also with the United Nations system. So that required very careful, delicate diplomacy, and the president succeeded. He didn't succeed alone. He succeeded with his Nigerian brothers, the Nigerian leaders, and he also succeeded very well in convincing the United Nations. In fact, we had to go to the International Court of Justice, and we won all those cases. And yet the president remained very calm and very humble in spite of those victories.
In the end, Cameroon and Nigeria, two neighboring and friendly countries, tied by history and geography, spared their populations the horrors and devastations of war and maintained their relations intact till this day. As somebody said, il a fallu du temps.
It was a little bit longer, but it was better to be longer and result in the decision that we all knew. We regained our sovereignty over Bakassi, without firing a shot.
For this to pull through, they needed several appearances at the International Court of Justice at The Hague, producing tons of evidence and memoranda. Then a number of high-level bilateral, multilateral, good offices and mediation efforts to thaw the ice. From St. Cloud in France to grain trade in the United States, passing through Geneva in Switzerland, where the important issues of world diplomacy take place. Thanks to Paul Biya, the Bakassi affair is taught in many political science faculties as a locus classicus in resolving international boundary disputes. This conflict reveals to the world a head of state who is both patient and perspicacious, calm but determined, an experienced and pragmatic diplomat, an apostle and beggar for peace, and who is magnanimous in victory.
If you look at the way the president has actually managed the different crises as compared to other countries, then we have to give him credit. Because up till date, Cameroon still stands up tall and proud amongst other nations. This is eloquent testimony that we have been on the right track of history.
Paul Biya's long tenure at the helm of state has been a permanent steeplechase that has often tried to derail his intentions.
This is what touches me most about our president. He is a father of the nation. You know, you hardly hear him talk. You don't hear people say, oh, we don't hear him talk. Why? He doesn't go on the street to be talking every day. He's talking. He's acting. When you want action, we want to see action, not just talking. So what happened in Switzerland lately is very unfortunate.
But none of these trials have succeeded in dousing his resolve. The statesman has revealed in his struggles that he is constant, patient, tolerant, but obstinate. Of course, he needed the smartness of a Betty Nongi or the protector in the Ekan cosmogony, the political intelligence of Machiavelli, but also a dose of wisdom borrowed from the Greek general Pericles to captain the ship of Cameroon through the murky and turbulent waters, reassuring his base, confounding and earning the respect of his most assiduous detractors and the international community. Thanks for watching. Until we meet again in another fortnight, stay blessed, stay safe, and goodbye.